If you've ever looked at a house listing and seen something like Zone X AE or Flood Zone A and thought, okay, but what does that actually mean for my monthly payment? This video is for you. Today, I'm breaking down flood zones in plain English with a Central Florida lens, so you know what matters, what doesn't, and how to avoid a very expensive surprise. Welcome, friends. I am Dominique, a homeschooling mom of 3 and your real estate advisor. In Central Florida, I help families buy and sell using calm processes, meaning less stress, more education, and fewer surprises. If you want more no-fluff real estate tips, then hit the subscribe button. Just a quick note before we dive in, I'm not an insurance. This is purely educational, designed to help you ask better questions and feel more confident when you're buying a home. So, what is a flood zone anyway? It's basically the government's way of saying, here's how likely this specific area is to flood based on maps and historical data. These zones mostly come from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and their flood insurance rate maps. You'll often hear people call them firm maps, the most important thing for you as a home buyer to understand is that the flood zone assigned to a property can directly affect 3 major things. First, whether you'll be required to have flood insurance. Second, how much that insurance will cost you. And third, certain building rules if you decide to renovate or build from scratch. It's a big deal. Now let's talk about who I am and why I'm so passionate about this. I'm a real estate professional right here in Central Florida, and I've seen firsthand how a simple letter on a map can completely change a buyer's experience. I've seen deals get complicated at the last minute because someone didn't get a flood insurance quote early. Enough. My goal is to give you the inside track, to demystify this process so you can navigate your home search with clarity and avoid those stressful 11th hour surprises. I want you to feel empowered, not overwhelmed. So let's translate the most common flood zones you'll actually see in Central Florida listings. First up is Zone X. This is the one most people hope for. Zone X usually means the area has a lower risk of flooding. Notice I said lower risk, not no risk. The key takeaway here is that lenders typically do not require you to carry flood insurance in Zone X. However, many people still choose to buy it. Why? Well, if the home is near a lake or pond, sits in a low-lying area, or even has a history of water issues, getting that optional policy can be a very smart move for peace of mind. In plain English, Zone X means a flood isn't likely, but it's still possible. Next, we have Zone AE and sometimes just Zone A. This one is the big one. If a property is in Zone AE, it's considered a high-risk flood area. These zones come with something called a base flood elevation, or BFE. The BFE is the height that floodwaters could reach during a major flood event if you are getting a mortgage on a home. In an AE or a zone, your lender will almost certainly require you to have flood insurance. The cost for this insurance can vary wildly. It depends on factors like the home's elevation relative to that BFE, the type of foundation, and the property's flood history. In plain English, Zone AE or A means your lender will probably require flood insurance, and you need to get a quote ASAP. Then there's Zone VE. You won't see this much in inland Central Florida cities like Orlando, but if you're looking closer to the coasts, it might pop up. VE is a very high-risk coastal area that's also subject to wave action. In plain English, Zone VE means very high risk, and it's mostly found right along the coast. Finally, there's Zone D. This one is less common but worth knowing. Zone D basically means the flood risk is undetermined. The area hasn't been fully mapped out yet. Because the risk is unknown, some lenders and insurance companies will treat it cautiously, sometimes acting as if it were a higher risk zone. In plain English, Zone D means unknown risk, and you definitely need to ask more questions. Now, I want to talk about the number one mistake I see buyers make. I hear this all the time. Oh, I don't need to worry. My house isn't in a flood zone. But what people usually mean when they say that is, my house isn't in a zone where flood insurance is required by my lender, and that is a huge, critical difference. The reality is, every single property is in a flood zone of some kind. It's just a question of whether it's low, moderate, or high risk, and flooding can and does happen outside of those designated high-risk A zones, especially here in Florida. We deal with intense, heavy rain events that can overwhelm local drainage systems in a matter of hours. We have canals and retention ponds everywhere that can overfill. We have homes built in low-lying yards that just don't drain well. And new development can completely change how water runs off in a neighborhood. The simple truth. Just because insurance isn't required doesn't mean flooding isn't possible. So, how do you protect yourself? What should you check before you fall in love with a house and get too far down the road? Here are the exact questions I want you to ask right at the beginning of your home search. First, what flood zone is the property in today? Not what it was 5 years ago. These maps get updated, and a property that was once in Zone X might now be in Zone AE. Always check the current map. Second, ask your lender, is flood insurance required for my specific loan type on this property? Even in a lower risk Zone X, some government-backed loans might have their own unique rules, so it's always best to confirm. Third, and this is maybe the most important tip, ask for a flood insurance quote early. I mean on day one, as soon as you identify a property you're serious about. Do not wait until the week of closing. A flood insurance policy can add hundreds of dollars to your monthly payment, and that could be enough to change the affordability of the home for you. Get that number up front. Next, ask the seller or your agent, has this property ever had a flood insurance claim? A prior claim can impact your insurance rates, even if the home is in a lower risk zone. And finally, look at the lot itself, not just the house. Walk the property. Is the yard sloped towards the foundation? Do you see any signs of standing water even after a small rain? Are there any nearby ponds, lakes, or canals that could overflow? If you can, talk to the neighbors. Ask them what the street looks like after a big summer storm. They'll give you the real story. So let's wrap this all up. Here's the practical takeaway for anyone buying a home here in Central Florida. If the home is in Zone X, you're likely in for a smoother process, but it's still very smart to get a quote for optional coverage just so you know your options. If the home is in Zone AE or A, you should expect to be required to have flood insurance. Get those quotes immediately to understand the full cost of ownership. And for any zone, you need to look at the big picture, the drainage, the property's history, and the real-world insurance pricing, not just the letter on the map. And please remember, flood risk isn't just about hurricanes. Central Florida can and does flood from heavy summer rain alone. I hope this helped clear things up for you. If you want a simple checklist of these questions, just drop the words flood check in the comments below, and I'll tell you the exact questions to send your real estate agent and insurance representative before you make an offer. And of course, if you're looking to buy a home here in Central Florida and want a calm, clear plan to get you there, all of my contact information is in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more straightforward real estate advice. I'll see you in the next one.